Good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday, happy warm, unusual weather that is completely spoiling me, and I'm expecting it every day. Of course, happy Bodhi Day, which you may have noticed. We've got some beautiful flowers, and we've got some balloons, and there is a Bodhi Day cake waiting for you downstairs, and our very own Chelsea has prepared torma muffins. I think there's pumpkin, and there's all kinds of really delicious muffins and things. So a wonderful time of the year. It's always the 8th day of the 12th month. And a number of folks asked me, they're like, okay, wait, I got Wesak and Bodhi Day confused. And so Wesak is in May, and that is a celebration of the Buddha's birthday, enlightenment, teaching, and transition. And Bodhi Day is the celebration of the Buddha's enlightenment. And so this morning I would like to share with you and talk first just a little bit about the traditional and historic story of the Buddha's enlightenment. But then I want to transition into talking a little bit about my experience 3 weeks ago at the Vajravidya Monastery in Crestone, Colorado. And then, so that's what I want to share with you guys today, and that's kind of basis of our talk. So let's get started. So Siddhartha Gautama, everyone knows as the traditional historical Buddha. His name was Siddhartha Gautama, the young prince, and he was a prince, very, very high up in the kingdom, and was, showered in nothing but ostentation and all kinds of wonderful things. So the young prince, as many of you know, he left the kingdom and the palace and all of the amenities, so to speak, to try to understand old age, sickness, and death. When he snuck out and discovered that, it moved him and touched him so much that he set out on a lifetime of discovering a way to bring an end to suffering. And so I want to kind of move past all of that and actually move to the evening of his enlightenment, when he sat underneath the Bodhi tree and what are known as the 3 watches. The 3 watches. So the young prince sat in meditation throughout the night, and during the first watch of the evening, he had a vision of all of his past lives, recollecting his place of birth, name, the caste or the societal level that he was in, and even the food he had eaten. And then during the second watch of the evening, he saw how beings rise and fall through the cycle of death and rebirth as a consequence of their karma, their past deeds. And in the third watch of the evening, the hours before dawn, he was liberated. And accounts differ somewhat as to precisely what it was that he understood. According to some versions, it was the 4 noble truths that he had an insight and discovered. The 4 noble truths, the truths of that life is suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path to the cessation of suffering, the 4 noble truths. And so that is what many people believe that he discovered or realized. Now, according to others, it was the sequence of what we call dependent origination that he discovered or embodied the knowledge and the wisdom of dependent origination. Dependent origination is how ignorance leads to speech and action, habituated patterns of speech and action, and eventually to birth, aging, and death. And how when ignorance is destroyed, so also is life on the wheel of samsara. The wheel of samsara is birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. In the Buddhist practice, the opposite of death is not life. The opposite of death is birth. Life is eternal. And so regardless of their differences, all accounts agree that on the night of his awakening, he became a Buddha, an awakened one, which is what Buddha means, awakened. One who had roused himself from the slumber of ignorance and extended his knowledge throughout the universe. And so this is the story of the night of his awakening and the 3 watches. And so many of you know that a group of us, about 24 of us, as a matter of fact, all went about 3.5 weeks ago to the monastery in Crestone, Colorado, where we spent 4 days on retreat. Some stayed longer and spent more time. And I wanted to share with you guys, right when I got back, my experience at the monastery. However, during the time that we were gone, there were a few interesting changes in our society, such as a very big election and a whole bunch of other stuff. And so both Robert Brummett, so those of you that may not know Robert, he's another one of our teachers here at TBC. He and I decided that we have more important things to try to discuss with the Sangha right now, because everybody was impacted by all of the events that had taken place. So now that we've had a couple weeks to talk a little bit about that and work with the Sangha, in some cases one-to-one or in small groups, now we've had a chance to do that, I wanted to take time today to share a little bit with you about my experience at the monastery during the retreat, because I feel that it applies very much to our discussion today about celebrating Bodhi Day and awakening and enlightenment and these terms, and what do they mean in our practice. So on the retreat, like I said earlier, it's in Crestone, Colorado. So in general, the general retreat itself, everything about it was absolutely stunning. There was the beautiful, the lodging, the monastery itself, the food, the mountains, the community there. While I was there, we would begin meditation sometimes at 7 a.m. in the morning in the shrine room at the monastery. And I recall getting there a little bit early one morning, maybe about 6:50, something like that. And I was sitting in meditation, and this delightful young lady who actually lives at the monastery is the shrine attendant. And so she was very busy going about filling the water. There's little cups of water all along the shrine, and there's candles, and there's incense. And as she was doing this, she was chanting and humming. And it was just so transcendent to be in this beautiful shrine room surrounded by all this and having this little attendant just chanting Om Tara Tu Re Soha. And she was just chanting as she was going about her business. It was just a beautiful, fond memory that I brought back with me. Most importantly about the retreat itself was that I did have an insight. I did have an awakened experience. And so that's what I want to share with you a little bit. My insight came on the morning of the 3rd day of the retreat. So we'd already had 2 days of stillness and silence and meditation and being with community in these beautiful surroundings. And so I had already had an opportunity to go pretty deep, and things were getting, as I said, I was having an opportunity to go very, very deep in my practice. I wasn't reading, there was no eye contact, not a lot of talking, just stillness, self-inquiry, and self-discipline. And so on the 3rd morning of the retreat, what I want to preface is that the night before, there was an emergency within the retreat. And so myself and another member of the Sangha took one of our Sangha members to the hospital in Ala Mesa, which is about an hour away. And hospitals on weekends, especially emergency rooms, aren't very fast, especially way out and kind of in the middle of nowhere. Allen Mesa is a big enough city that there was enough going on that we were waiting in the emergency room till about 4 or 5 in the morning. And so that's actually not so much a part of it, but the reason I'm sharing it with you is because it added to this. So back to the third morning, I was sleep deprived because we had been up all night. Our member of our song is okay. Everything was taken care of. That was fine. So all good there. However, I was sleep deprived, and I'd also had a chance to go pretty deeply over the 2 days. So that morning, because I had been in the emergency room till 5 in the morning, what came up for me was for 8 years as I caretook for my mother, I had visited the emergency room many times. And we were in there until 4 or 5 in the morning many, many times. And so this brought up all of those years of caretaking for my mother, who, as many of you know, passed a year ago, November. And so that morning, the grieving showed up. I've kind of been waiting for it. I didn't want to push it. I didn't want to force the grieving. I didn't want to try to, it comes when it comes. And so that morning, the grieving showed up, and it was a beautiful space, very loving, very safe, very kind. And so instead of going downstairs for meditation and to breakfast and then to chanting and then to the Dharma Talk, I stayed in my room and allowed the process to unfold. I allowed the process to run its course. And so it was a very intense morning for me. And so all of this was coming through. But one of the things that I have learned over my 20 years of meditating and working with mindfulness is that there is a momentum to this purification. And so through the momentum of allowing anything and everything, all of it to move through, more things showed up because there's that momentum, right? It's pulling it all with it. And this is the beauty of the practice itself. And so at some point, what showed up for me, very much like the story of Siddhartha Gautama on the night of his awakening, I did not see all of my past lives, but what did show up for me in just an instant through all of this were all of my roles through my whole life, whether it was student, son, Cub Scout, teacher, director, lover, boyfriend, anything, any role that you can think of, they all showed up at the same time. My little room was crowded. And they were all there, and it wasn't scary in any way. It felt incredibly loving and kind, because at the moment they all showed up, I knew that I was at the same time, I was all of them, and I was none of them. All of these roles that I've ever played, that I'm playing now, that I will play in the future, I am not that. And yet, there they are. And so this was very liberating, very, very expansive feeling for me. It wasn't anything I needed to analyze. It wasn't anything I needed to figure out. It wasn't anything I needed to quickly jot down and write a book and then sell it for $19.95 and travel the country speaking in rainy days all over the world. None of that needed to happen. Just experience it. And that vastness of it, all the roles, I am none of them, and yet I am all of them. And what showed up for me was this when we are present in each moment, the role, what we call roles, are simply our presence responding from a place of love to what is needed here and now. Sometimes it's teacher, sometimes it's student, sometimes it's husband, sometimes it's friend. Those roles are really literally a present moment response from presence to that moment. And so this is what I wanted to share with you guys, along with this idea of awakening and enlightenment. Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh uses a garden metaphor when discussing these two. In other words, we till the soil, right? We work the land. We till the soil, the garden of our mind, which is our meditation, our mindfulness, our studies, being with Sangha. All of this is tilling the soil until there comes a sprout, an insight. You've heard me talk of other insights, like the time I was on a retreat and I had the insight that I have these glasses on, that I see what's wrong with everything, what's wrong with people, places, and things. I see what's wrong so that I could then fix, repair, save, as if anybody needed that. Early in my practice, I saw that and was able to take the glasses off and now just see people, places, and things as they are, not as I want them or as I see them. All these insights, these are the sprouts. We are the fruits of our practice. And so these little sprouts, as we till the soil, we have these little awakened experiences. And some of them, like any garden, some of them last a while. Some of them are very quick and go away. And so this, for me, this is kind of the idea of awakening, these insights. Because when I began to have insights, what struck me more than the insight itself at that moment was, oh my God, there's different ways to see the world. It was an opening. In other words, there were things that I did not know that I did not know. And the moment you realize that you don't know nothing, you know everything. And so these little insights, as they sprout, as we till the soil, as we work the practice, for me, awakening are these insights, waking up from the dream of thought, waking up from these habituated patterns of speech and behavior and action. This is awakening. And so enlightenment is when the garden matures and you can begin to sustain yourself from it. Many more of these constantly happening. At first, there's just a few, but there's more and more. The more we begin to cultivate that, the more we realize that those even exist, those little insights. And so sometimes there is an existential fear that drops away, and a deep peace replaces the old baseline of fear. That existential fear drops away, and what is replaced is just this baseline of a realization that everything is okay. Everything is all right. It's a much bigger picture. It's a much bigger context. And it does not mean that in this moment, some experience is not going to be painful. Some experiences is not going to challenge us to our core. It does. Life is painful. And through the awakening process and through as we glimpse enlightenment, there is still going to be the human form and the things that we experience on a day-to-day level. We can have gradual experiences. For some, for others, it is sudden. For some, they can have these experiences on a mountaintop. Others, you could have it in your busy, daily, active lives. And so it does not mean that one is always forever after going to be at peace, because what we know is that shift happens, right? So, and sometimes these shifts in our lives, in our relationships, in our job, in our governments can be very, very painful. And there is still loss, and there's sadness and fear. And through all of this, awareness. Awareness helps us to make a clear distinction between pain and suffering. Moments of clarity allow us to see how our habituated patterns of speech and behavior are actually creating our reality. This brings empowerment, an embodied empowerment, not a knowledge, not a head empowerment. It's wisdom. Wisdom helps us realize that everything is going to be all right. My teacher used to say, wisdom tells us that no one is suffering. Compassion tells us that it hurts anyway. And so we wake up from the dream of thought and become very open to each moment as it unfurls, no longer needing to manipulate the world to try to get it to do what we want it to do. The constant clinging to sense pleasure of any kind, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional pleasure, all the clinging. And at the same time, the avoidance of pain of any kind, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional pain. Here we are, every waking moment, working so hard, striving, struggling, to no avail whatsoever, because no matter what we cling to, it leaves. That's impermanence. And no matter what we try to keep away, the pain, it still shows up. And so the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, taught us, open hand, relax, go lightly. Even though you feel deeply, learn to feel lightly. Have an open hand, be present with the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows. And one cannot become enlightened by insisting that life stay just the same as it always has been. If you meditate, your life will change. Guaranteed. First, it will get better for all the reasons shown in research: increased awareness, self-regulation, empathy, optimism. But as awareness grows, it will start to challenge your comfort zone. Your bad habits, dysfunctional relationships, and conflict triggers all show up in the light of awareness again and again. That's why this is a practice. You will constantly face choices to either turn towards your true nature or slide back into what's comfortable, habituated, or expected. If you keep sitting, if you stay true to meditation, awareness will eventually erupt into these aha experiences where we glimpse your true nature, where some people even think or call this glimpse enlightenment itself. I'm not so sure personally, I don't know. I maybe think of it more as grace, as a moment of grace where the universe, which is madly in love with us, conspires for a moment of clarity, a moment of seeing everything exactly as it is, seeing our body's response to it, and at the same time, seeing a much bigger picture and context, which then, instead of bringing up jealousy, anger, separation, division, hatred, fear, it brings up compassion. When I can't breaks down into who is it that cannot. When I have no choice, unravels into how can I be of service. When the tongue stuck in no tires into yes. When all we can do is freed from all that has been done. A presence that is everyone's and no one's will keep the inner light alive. and the way a beating heart at night keeps all the stars in place. Thank you so much, and happy Bodhi Day.